Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the first episode of a brand new series. We're going to go position by position, talking about the Detroit Lions, mainly because I want to talk about the Detroit Lions, and you can't tell me what to do. We're going to start off with quarterbacks and running backs today, and we're going to start off that conversation with Jared Goff, the three-time Pro Bowl quarterback who signed maybe the most unfriendly, in terms of being team-friendly, contract extension I've ever seen. Not that he didn't deserve the money. He did deserve the extension. He was arguably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL this past season, especially with all the injuries at the quarterback position. But there is no wiggle room with this contract at all. The only possible way for the Lions to clear cap space in 2026, when he has a $69 million cap hit, is to sign him to another extension. So Jared Goff is going to be the quarterback for the Detroit Lions for forever, effectively, because there is no way to get out of the contract without paying all of it, effectively. And more importantly, in my opinion, there's no way to really restructure it in any significant manner to clear cap space that doesn't involve a contract extension. So for Jared Goff, this is a brilliant contract. For the Detroit Lions, this is maybe the worst contract that they ever could have negotiated. However, I think the Lions were just willing to do whatever the fuck Jared Goff wanted them to do. Even though I don't particularly think this is a good contract. I'm fine with the money. I'm fine with the length. None of that really makes all that much of a difference to me. What makes the difference is the fact that this is an incredibly player-friendly deal that is going to actively hurt the Detroit Lions 2 years from now. To put this into perspective, there has only been one team in the history of the NFL where the quarterback has taken up more than 12% of the cap and won the Super Bowl. That one team was the Kansas City Chiefs this past season, where they have the best player ever to play the game of football in Patrick Mahomes, who made more than 12% of the total cap. Jared Goff this year is slated to make 10.6% of the cap. Assuming a modest increase in the cap next season, he is going to take up 12.5% in 2025. In 2026, again, including a moderate increase to the cap. So again, hypothetically, it could increase greater than what is being anticipated in this sort of exercise that I'm doing, in which case it would be less, but it's not going to increase so much that we're going to dip under 12% past the first year of this contract extension. The year that he has that $69.6 million contract extension, 2026, he will account for almost 1/4 of the cap, which means the Lions are either going to extend him after the 2025 season to clear that cap, or they're going to get bent over a table that year. And they're going to have to make some relatively tough decisions in terms of who they get to sign and extend and who they have to cut. Mainly heading into that offseason, that will be likely when an Aiden Hutchinson contract extension is done. It won't take account in terms of against the cap until 2027, but the 2026 offseason will be when those contract negotiations will be going on. And in 2027, which is the last year of the current Jared Goff deal, Jared Goff will be, again, projected 17.4% of the cap. Meaning, for all intents and purposes, the Lions' Super Bowl window is this year and next year. Because afterwards, you're going to be paying Jared Goff way too much money in order to be able to keep the team together, especially considering we have to somehow come up with a way to pay Aleem McNeil after this season, as well as getting key players back, like potentially Carlton Davis, like potentially Derek Barnes, as well as Ife Melifonwu as well. The Lions somehow have to come up with money to pay all of those contributors after this year, and they, I'll just be honest with you, flat out and straight up, don't have the money to. There's a very real possibility all of those players are gone after this year, especially if Liam McNeil plays like he played this past season, because that's a $20 million defensive tackle, and the Lions cannot afford to pay him that. They just can't, especially if they're going to try to negotiate a contract with Aiden Hutchinson in the future, with Jameson Williams or Sam Laporta, or a multitude of other players as well. So effectively, Jared Goff has positioned himself to effectively guarantee that he is going to once again be put at the top of the quarterback market heading into the 2026 season, because the Lions are going to have to sign him to an extension in order to clear money to pay some of their other players on the roster. And I'm not blaming Jared Goff for taking this contract. This is a fantastic contract for Jared Goff. It effectively guarantees him almost $200 million over the next 4 years, and then a fifth year where he could hypothetically earn more than that. But the fact also remains that this is not a team-friendly deal, and there's not a whole lot that the Lions can do to clear that money. They can't really restructure it. They can't really ask him to take less money against the cap by moving it to a signing bonus, because the signing bonus is so big, which leaves only an extension as the only possible way that they could potentially clear a little bit of cap after the 2025 season heading into the 2026 season. And once again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not blaming Jared Goff for this, but I do think this contract is a bad contract for the Detroit Lions. Again, I like the player. He was arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this past season. He threw 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. Those are elite numbers. He's a very, very good football player. 3-time Pro Bowler, and if the Lions decide to throw the ball a little bit more this year, which there has been some rumors about them potentially opening it up a little bit more, with presumably Jameson Williams becoming a bigger part of the offense, then I think Jared Goff might be a dark horse MVP candidate if he can get to like 400 more yards and 4 or 5 more touchdowns. Then he's standing at 4,800 yards, 35 touchdowns, presumably still probably be around 10, 11 picks like he was last year. That, combined with the fact that if the Lions win 13 or 14 games this year, like many people are projecting them to win, that is a compelling case for MVP. But I still don't like the contract. I think they could have done a better contract here. And that is somewhat concerning, because they do still have a whole lot of players that they got to pay. Even after this year, they got to pay a lot of people like Derek Barnes and Fatu Melifonwu. And the biggest one is going to be Liam McNeil. And there is now a significant possibility that Liam McNeil is kind of just forced to walk, because the Lions are not going to be able to give him the amount of money that he wants, unless it's on like a 1 year, like prove it deal, I guess. But I don't know why Liam McNeil would sign that unless he gets hurt, which nobody wants to have happen. And he played like a Pro Bowl defensive tackle this past year, again, before he got hurt. But he had 5.5 sacks in, I think, 12 games in the regular season, because I think he missed the last 5 games of the regular season. And that's real good. That's real good. He's probably sitting at 7.5, maybe 8, if he plays those last 5 games. So that's a Pro Bowl caliber defensive lineman that we're going to have to let walk in free agency, because largely because of the Jared Goff contract. And no, because I know your first thought is going to be, oh, well, they had to sign him to a contract extension. He played really good. No, they didn't. They could have signed him to a much better deal, I think, personally. You could make the argument that they had to give him an extension, and I would honestly be inclined to agree with you there. But they didn't have to do this deal. This is objectively a very bad deal for the Detroit Lions. However, is it better than the alternative and letting Jared Goff walk? I don't know, but a lot of that is going to depend upon our 3rd round pick from 2 years ago. A quarterback out of Tennessee named Hendon Hooker. And this is someone that I'm actually kind of excited to watch play in the preseason. Normally, I'm not all that excited to watch the preseason games. I will watch them because they're football and there's nothing else to do. But most of the time, I don't actually have any real insight that I think I can glean from watching the preseason, other than, oh, this guy might make the roster, this guy might not. But generally speaking, those types of players are not going to make all that much of an impact anyway. I am actually excited to see Hendon Hooker play. I want to see what he looks like, even against second-team defenses and third-team defenses and fourth-team defenses filled with guys that are not going to make an actual NFL roster. However, I was high on Hendon Hooker when he came out. In fact, the first YouTube video I ever made, I didn't post it, but the first YouTube video I ever made was a top 5 quarterbacks video for that class, where I ranked Hendon Hooker at 5 and had a first-round grade on him. I had a top 40 grade on him, which technically isn't a first-round grade, but he is someone that I think could have snuck into the back end of the first round had he been healthy. If not, I think he goes early second round as well. If you're talking about a comp for him in terms of physical attributes and potentially level of play, I don't think Geno Smith is that bad of a comparison. I think they have similar levels of arm talent. I think they're similar builds in terms of athletically. They can both move around a little bit. And I think in terms of play style, they would also be fairly similar. So if you want to look at Geno Smith as a, I think, fairly realistic ceiling for Hendon Hooker, then maybe the Jared Goff contract doesn't make a whole lot of sense. However, at this point, with Ben Johnson calling the plays, Jared Goff's floor as a quarterback, meaning the worst he could be within reasonable expectations, is higher than Geno Smith. Jared Goff, at his worst day, with this offense and the weapons that he has around him, is going to be better than Geno Smith. So, circling back to the conversation surrounding the Jared Goff contract here, is the contract bad? Yes. Is the alternative worse? I would also say yes, because we don't even know if Hendon Hooker is going to even be as good as Geno Smith. And Geno Smith, I think, is a good quarterback. Like, I think he's good. I think he's only made the Pro Bowl these past few years because so many other players opted out. But he's a good quarterback. He's sort of in that third tier of quarterbacks, but I would say he's at the very top of that third tier of quarterback. And I would say Jared Goff is in the middle, maybe leaning towards the top of like a second tier of quarterbacks. Like, Jared Goff isn't Lamar Jackson. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Josh Allen. You know, those are sort of the top 3 guys. And then I would put Joe Burrow in there as well. He's been hurt this past season, so we've kind of forgotten about him. But I would put Joe Burrow in that conversation as well. But you can make the argument that that is the first tier of quarterbacks and there isn't anybody else. And Jared Goff is in that second tier somewhere. I think if I actually sat down and thought about it, Jared Goff would probably be 7 or 8 for me, which would put him in the top 4th of the league, which is significantly better than Geno Smith. So to sort of close out that whole conversation here, I do understand that they had to sign him to a contract because the alternative is worse than a very, very bad contract. However, with that contract, it is kind of like just barely worse. Now, maybe Hendon Hooker can end up hitting that ceiling of being Geno Smith, in which case we had the best backup quarterback in the NFL. However, you're not probably going to pay Hendon Hooker, even if he does hit that ceiling, as much as you're going to pay Jared Goff. So from a money perspective, it might not be the worst idea to see what you have in Hendon Hooker. But I don't really see a scenario for them being able to do that this year or next year or even the year after that, at which point Hendon Hooker's contract is done. So the third round selection on a quarterback, in and of itself, I don't care. I think it's fine. I think a backup quarterback is one of the most valuable things that you can have, especially if he's a first round-ish sort of talent like Hendon Hooker. So even though they did sign Jared Goff to an extension past Hendon Hooker's ability to likely be on this football team, I'm still not mad about the pick. I like the pick still. just to be honest with you, because if Jared Goff does go down, we do have a very talented quarterback as a backup that we can turn to and potentially still win games. Now it's time to move on to the running backs, and we're going to talk about the Pro Bowl back from a year ago, Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is one half of the best running back tandem in the NFL. He's a explosive and elusive runner with a surprising amount of not necessarily power, but the ability to break tackles and play through contact. He was much more of a slasher this past season than I expected him to be when he came out of the NFL draft. And I still stand by my original take where I don't like the pick at 12. And I probably would have taken Christian Gonzalez instead. And Christian Gonzalez, in like 3 games that he played, looked like a top 5 corner in the NFL for the Patriots. And this year, assuming he stays healthy, I think we're going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, if we had drafted Christian Gonzalez, we're probably in the Super Bowl this past season. But it doesn't matter. We can't go back in time and change the past. And I am happy with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's very, very good. I think he's probably going to have a much larger load this year than he did last year, and assuming health, as well as the fact that he didn't particularly have that big of a role the first like 6-7 games of the year. I think there's a very real possibility he tops 1,000 yards. He might even get to like 11 or 1,200, as well as double-digit total touchdowns. So someone that I think could also end up being more of a factor in the passing game this year than he was last year. Effectively early on in the season, they tried to use him as a little bit of a gadget player, and it just didn't work. And then they started using him like a running back, and he ended up being effective. And then he kind of adjusted to the speed of the NFL, and he ended up being really, really, really good. And I think this year he's going to take that next step and become truly an elite every down running back. The other back that honestly should have made the Pro Bowl this past season, but the other half of the best running back duo in the NFL is David Montgomery. I firmly believe that he should have made the Pro Bowl this past season. I think if he hadn't missed 3 or 4 games this past season, he probably would have had another 150, 200 yards and probably another touchdown or 2, in which case it would have been undeniable that he should have made the Pro Bowl. He did just barely top 1,000 yards rushing this past year, and I do think he's going to take more of a change of pace back for Jahmyr Gibbs in short yardage sort of situation role this year. I do think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to end up being the number 1 guy, so to speak, by the end of the season. However, if the Lions run the ball like they ran the ball last year, which there's a significant probability they do that, and he can stay healthy, he still has a really good chance at 1,000 rushing yards and potentially his first career Pro Bowl berth, which he should have gotten last year. Moving on to the backup backs here. These are players that are going to make more of an impact on special teams than they are in terms of actually running the football, again, barring injury. However, I do believe this year, unlike the vast majority of last year, I do believe this year that the Lions are going to carry 4 running backs, not 3. And that means they're going to have to take a player away from another position group. I don't know where that would be, but if I had to place an educated guess, I think it would likely be the defensive line. I believe the Lions carried 11 defensive linemen in the initial roster that they had and 10 in terms of the actual week 1 roster. It would not surprise me if that was only 9 once we actually get into the season, with that extra spot going to Sione Vaki. I do think Craig Reynolds is going to make the team still. He's an excellent special teams player, and if need be, a honestly not horrible option at the running back position. So when looking at the projected depth chart here for the quarterback position, this is where I see it right now. Jared Goff is going to make the roster. Hendon Hooker is going to make a roster. They are roster locks. Nate Sudfeld, the third quarterback that the Lions have right now, is firmly on the bubble. I think it's unlikely that he makes the roster. And I think he's probably one of the last people cut that they then try to sign to the practice squad in case they need him going forward. In all honesty, I think this one, as far as the quarterbacks go, is pretty simple. And the running backs are very much more of the same. So we've got 1A and 1B with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I would lean in for Craig Reynolds. Again, would it be totally shocking if he were to be cut? No, but I don't think it's very likely. Same with Sione Vaki as well. I just think he's going to offer too much value as a special teams player for him to not make the roster, especially with the new kickoff rules. So I would lean in for him as well. As far as the other running backs go, Zonovan Knight, I think, is likely to be cut. Jamar Jefferson, I think, is a definitive candidate for the practice squad. I don't particularly believe Zonovan Knight is. And also Jake Funk, particularly because of the potential value that he would offer as a returner, also seems like a candidate for the practice squad. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And with that, I would like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with any point or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.